Welcome to the Even Better podcast, where your host, Sinikka Waugh of Your Clear Next Step, brings you exciting content about making communities better by helping people get even better at work.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. This is Sinikka Waugh with the Even Better podcast. This is part of our ongoing mission here at Your Clear Next Step to help you have an even better workday so that together we can co-create better communities. I am delighted today to have with me our guest, Matt Arnold. Matt, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you. A pleasure to be here.
This is such a joy. For those of you who don't know Matt, I am just getting to know Matt. We've had a couple of conversations now, and I am starting to know Matt as a grace-filled human who is just really willing to have wonderful conversations and has this depth of knowledge around human-centered design, where he is able to bring us along in the conversation about really putting people first, putting the user first, putting the human first in these conversations about design, about solutions, about whatever it is we're trying to do. And I'm just so excited because I think many of us have been trying to do this in our solutioning spaces for years. We didn't know what to call it, or we didn't know it had a name. And he understands that it has a name, that there's a science to it, there's a methodology to it, there's an art to it. And Matt, I'm just so excited to hear your insights. So I know that you've got lots of experience in this space, that you have a background in some stuff that's not necessarily science-based, that you've got a background in the humanities, in communication studies, which is similar to my own bias there. And that you've come along here now in the technology space, but in human-centered design. So tell us a little bit more about you. I know you're at Brightidea. Tell us a little bit about that and your journey.
Yeah, thank you. And again, thanks for having me. So my journey basically is a long and winding one, so I'll try to keep it short and succinct. But yeah, I got into the world of design through broadcast and film. I went to the University of Iowa as an undergrad. Communication studies, my focus initially was filmmaking. And as I went through the required courses in the communication discipline, became a lot more interested in how people construct meaning and how teams collaborate. And then went to grad school, and my master's degree was on computer augmented group decision making. So this was back in the 90s, but it was a joint project with the computer science department at Illinois State and the communication department. And so was looking at how do people use technology, how do they collaborate, and what we also call sense making. That I got into sense making and design. And this was early days of the web. So nobody was really trained in how do we build commercial websites. But I got into the web, and then was doing more design and connected with other designers, and then got more formal training in design as we went along. But that was really kind of my path. It's not one that I necessarily recommend, because there was no flight path, right, where this is going. But it was early days of internet and e-commerce that got me into design, and then continued to get deeper and deeper into levels of design and how businesses can harness value by creating something that customers truly want and need, rather than being kind of inside out. Here's what we think the customers need, put it out in the market, and then realize that it was off target.
Right. This makes so much sense. So as we're listening today, the folks who are listening, some of us are in design spaces, some of us are business analysts, some of us are project managers, some of us are business owners, some of us are educators. I mean, there are people in all different walks of life listening to this podcast. And the thing we have in common, I think, is that mostly everybody goes to work, right? And we provide products or services or interact with customers of some sort. We interact in some way with consumers of the things that we do with our day-to-day. And many of our listeners are in that technology space. We're all in technology these days, right? We're all technologists now. Right. We're all technology companies. But the part of why I wanted to visit with you and hear more of your story is because so many of us are in that technology space. So many business analysts, project managers, product owners, companies moving that shift to the product owner mindset. And as we're thinking about that, we had several of the customers that I'm working with right now asking more about human-centered design and kind of what it is. And you and I had an interesting conversation about value, right? And I heard you use that phrase, capturing value. And so kind of what we're talking about today is how to use human-centered design to capture value as kind of the theme of the day. So as we look at that, let's kind of unpack that into these four sort of points or subpoints. And I think one of the first ones we're going to start with is really what is it? What do you mean by human-centered design?
Yeah, thank you. And just stepping back throughout my career, to early in my career, there was a lot of like deployment of enterprise software, right? And all these teams yet competing needs, right? From what project manager needs to what the business analysts need, and trying to keep everybody happy inside getting work done. And sometimes egos can get in the way. There's different, conflicting components, and we've moved a long way from kind of waterfall development where it was like we're going to spend a year outlining requirements, and then we're going to spend 6 months deploying. And so, kind of aligned with almost the Agile manifesto. If you go back to the original Agile manifesto, it's making things work for customers. So there's even hints of human-centered design, but it's a fairly straightforward. It's really putting the humans at the center of the work that we're doing. And so some of your listeners may have also heard of design thinking, right? And design thinking is this process. It is really more of a mindset on how we can put the humans and human need in front, and then make systems work for the way that humans think, the way that they behave, right? And so the discipline has become a lot more sophisticated too, as we've dug into behavioral science and cognition, right? How we perceive shapes, how we perceive colors, alerts, what do we need? And early in my career, and it's still historically true, enterprise software has been really rough and difficult to use. But as consumers, though, what we've seen over, especially like the past 2 decades, how easy it is to do banking online, how easy it is to reserve a hotel room, right? How easy it is to book travel and flights. Those are all, you have designers that are working to make that happen. But I think one of the things that has changed over the years is sometimes we look at design as just the presentation layer, and we can pretty that up later. But I really believe in, one thing Steve Jobs said about design is it's about how the whole thing works, right? So you're designing this whole system, and what we want to do is really put the human in front. And with that, then we also see it reduces egos internally, because if there's conflict, it's default to the customer need, because at the end of the day, that is going to produce more value for your company. Forrester, the research company, has done, the Design Management Institute has shown, when you focus on customer outcomes, businesses outperform their peers. And so that's where we see just really understanding customer need, and really understanding their goals. And so sometimes I also talk about human-centered design as goal-based design. Just what is your customer trying to achieve? Why is that important to them? And in what context are they trying to achieve that? And then that that produces insights that makes, in my opinion, makes work flow a lot more smoothly in organizations when you're anchoring it around customer need.
Absolutely. So as I'm hearing you talk about this, these concepts, sure, they apply to software, and that's where many of us hear them. But I'm going back to I don't know if it was real or if it was a fable, but the stories of the college campuses that waited the semester and redesigned the field, the green spaces between buildings, and didn't put any sidewalks in, let the students walk the paths across the green spaces, and then put sidewalks where the students walked.
To see what that kind of that natural path would be. And so that's a great example of, we're trying to allow, literally in this case, better states of flow for people. This is how they would accomplish their work. We think about human-centered design. Also, some of my colleagues have done a lot of work in the medical space, and what becomes interesting there, unfortunately, if you've spent a lot of time in a hospital, you realize how many like beeps and alerts there are, because every machine is developed separately, right, but not orchestrated for what that nurse experience might be, or what that patient experience is. So you might have 5 different machines with 5 different beeps going on in a room. Each one was designed with good intent, right? These beeps are alerts. But then when they're put into this context, right, then those beeps almost become noise after a while, and it's hard to tell, for a nurse what to listen to. And so I know a team that's working on actually trying to orchestrate those all together, and how can you have different signifiers to make it more humane and more insightful. Like the alert really just needs to be there when something important is happening, so that we don't become conditioned as background noise.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, great. Okay. So it's putting the human, like the human, the person, putting the human, the user, the customer, whoever it is, at the center of what we're doing.
Yeah. And where that helps create value. And also, sometimes I think there's pushback that, okay, that's all well and good, but we're here to make money as a business, or we're here to, create value. But pragmatically, what human-centered design can do as a mindset is you're answering three basic questions kind of in sequence. And the first is desirability. Do they want it? Right? Because if it's something they don't want, right, and we've seen lots of product flops in the market, but if it's something they don't want, why are we spending energy and time building that? And then with human-centered design, one of its big mindsets is show, don't tell. So it's prototyping and working with the customer throughout the process to refine. And so that's where you can also check for feasibility. Can we do it? So now you've answered they want it and we can do it. Then ultimately there's a business question on viability. Should we do it? But sometimes we go through and try to answer viability first. And that's burning a lot of resources for something that might not be valuable.
Might not be valuable. Absolutely. I recall hearing someone talk about lawnmowers and how many lawnmowers were equipped with the jackrabbit setting and the turtle setting. And the realization that how many of us actually use the turtle setting? None of us want the turtle setting. We just want to go straight to jackrabbit.
Right.
There's the desirability. And does the customer even want this? Why are we doing this if the customer doesn't want it? That's great. So a great way to capture value. And it's from the customer ultimately who is going to pay for the thing or is going to be using the thing or is going to be asked to recreate the thing. And I can think of the implications of this as we're looking at change management, even within the internal workings of an organization. Maybe you're not designing a new product. Maybe you're just changing behaviors within a system, within a business system in your organization. Thinking human-centered design, you can help think about how desirable are these changes that and how feasible and how viable the changes that you're asking. Put the human that you're asking to change the behaviors, put them first to help create the end solution that you're looking for.
That's right. And I think that works almost throughout an entire product life cycle, right? From what is the true need? What are they trying to accomplish? Then if they have this, how might they use it? What's the best way that it could almost be frictionless in their life? And then there's other times with design where actually friction is important. Do we need to alert somebody or pause? Years ago, I was doing work with a large ag manufacturer with a large footprint in Iowa. There are times where alerts and beeps are important. I was talking about the nurse situation, but one of the things we found in context was for Australian farmers, fields there are even longer than they are in Iowa. And the tractors can have a lulling kind of peaceful swaying falling asleep kind of for the operator. And so sometimes there are pings just to make sure that are you up and alert, right? And so there are other times where friction is actually good or important, or early days of programming where like you could cancel out of something without saving, right? But somebody wanted to throw up an alert. Are you sure? Do you want to save before you go? Those are small times where actually alerts can be helpful in context, but in general, trying to be frictionless in what the user's trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Oh, this is really, really fascinating stuff. Okay, so in the interest of time, we got to keep moving though. So we're talking about, if you've just joined us in the podcast, thank you for joining us. You'd probably better rewind because we're here talking with Matt Arnold, and we're talking about how to use human-centered design to capture value. And we've just spent the first piece really talking about what is human-centered design and really putting some framework around it. We're moving into a second one about value and really that focusing on customers' needs can help provide clarity. So let's unpack that a little bit. What kind of clarity do we get out of this human-centered design?
And this goes back to, again, what are the customer goals? What are they really trying to achieve? And then basically kind of working backwards from that. How can we make that a reality? And as we've talked in organizations, when you can center around the customer need, one of the things it reduces is internal ego and debate. And so related to that too is that focusing on the customer, as I've said, there are groups that have spent time looking at design-centered, customer-focused companies that outperform the market, outperform their peers. And one of the things I thought I'd share too is PricewaterhouseCoopers or PwC. They regularly look at the innovation space, and within innovation, and there's so much overlap between human-centered design and innovation. But they look at companies that focus on need seeking, market reading, and tech driven. So need seeking is, again, what the customer needs. Market reading is just where are trends, what are we seeing, directionality. And then tech driven is more like traditional R&D. We have new tools. What might that enable? But what PwC has found is the companies that do the best actually can do all three at the same time. But when in doubt, it's the ones that focus on need seeking first, then outperform their peers. And so just getting better at understanding customers, understanding their needs. And we were talking a little while ago, some of Amazon's secret sauce is their working backwards approach. And one of the tools that they use is long form narrative as a story, but it's a story about what would be valuable for the customer in the future. They write a press release as if it were real, and then they work backwards to make it happen, rather than the traditional model is let's make something and then let's kind of throw it over the fence to marketing to write a press release to make this sound appealing. And so kind of flipping that on its head, but Amazon is famous for the customer obsession. And that's a lot of what has allowed Amazon to basically be an invention machine for 2 decades, is this relentless focus on customer.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they do it exceptionally well. You just can't argue with their focus on customer. They see it and they capitalize on it, and kudos to them for doing it, man.
Right. And as I share with folks, you have to go way back a little bit. I know I'm dating myself, but when Amazon started in the late 90s, it was an online bookstore. And then they added, VHS tapes, right, and CDs for their music, but there wasn't anything digital. And the way they expanded into digital, and now, they're producing Emmy award-winning content, right? They have AWS. Most of your customers probably are either using directly themselves or services that are provided by AWS. Prime, Alexa were all elements that came out of their working backwards long form narrative process.
It's just phenomenal. Just phenomenal. And that's all. That is absolutely value by focusing on what the customer needs, putting that customer first, putting that human at the center. So human-centered design.
Yeah. And one of the things too that I like to remind clients is that customers buy value. They don't buy org charts. And a lot of times we get stuck in how our business is organized today. But a customer never goes to buy a particular car or goes to a particular hotel chain because, I know how this finance team is organized, or here's where the legal team sits here. No, they're buying value, but we get so caught up in our day-to-day, and it's natural, right? But when we're able to look at customer need, I find that as a way to kind of diffuse some of the challenges internally. And if we're a little bit more open to organizing around customer need rather than kind of this inside out approach to org charts, we can also open up for new business possibilities.
Oh, lovely. Lovely. Okay, so we're talking with Matt Arnold here on the theme of how to use human-centered design to capture value. So it seems like a no-brainer to me. It seems like you've described what it is and the value that it can provide. So there's got to be some challenges. Why aren't more companies doing this?
That is a great question, right? And we'll go back to humans, right? Sometimes change is hard. I think about this. One of my fellow kind of design and innovation colleagues, friend, Sal Kaplan at Business Innovation Factory, I remember he had shared with me over his career, like if he could go back and change something that he learned from his MBA early in his career to where he moved with innovation, is the difference between market making and market taking. Mm-hmm. And when we're going with human-centered design, it opens up a lot of market making opportunities. There are new things, new categories we might create for customers rather than just fighting against other competitors, right? Which becomes almost a commodity game. And then somebody can outflank you pretty easily on being faster or cheaper. But if you're truly building something a customer needs, that value, right, you're creating something for value for them, and then you're capturing it through even new business models. But the difference between market taking versus market making, I think, is a philosophy or mindset. Another thing I found is in organizations that have done something really cool in the past and solved a really interesting challenge, there are people inside the organization that made that happen. And a lot of times their identity is built on, I did this. And so if we're doing something new, that's different. And as an organizational design coach of mine early in my career, she just reminded me remember, a new idea is killing an old idea. And just having a little bit of empathy for others internally. So also, how can we acknowledge that we've done great things? We want to continue to do great things. It's not dismissing what was done in the past, but sometimes we kind of hard code these old systems, and then we're unable to change. And Maddox Douglas, an innovation firm, and also the management consulting firm Accenture, over the past few years, they've done research on innovation and shown that organizations struggle more now to be innovative than they did 10 years ago. And part of that is we continue to retreat back to old business models, almost the market taking, and we don't have the possibility to address the new, to look at customer needs. And not only the customer need for goals for desirability and that being a pragmatic path to create a new product or service, customers will also be telling you where the market's going. Right. So when you're staying on top of this, understanding customer needs, starting to see patterns in changes of behavior, and really getting kind of outside of the organizational walls, you can see a lot more possibility. So I apologize, I was rambling a little bit there, but I think it comes down to a lot of change management elements. And I know that is a little bit cliche, but change is hard for folks. And so how do you can apply human-centered design to change internally? What is it that the people inside the organization need, right? And it's usually not just you have to do what I say, right? There's ways to understand their needs, their comfort level, get people on board. But again, what I found is when you organize around the customer, when I've done customer research, whether that's deep ethnography with customers, like going into their homes, following them on their jobs, on what they do, you can take video of that and show people, here's what's going on, right? And here's what it's really, here are their struggles. You can listen to voice of customer from contact centers, right? Here are the problems, here's the needs that they have. And quickly, I'll share a short story. I was doing work years ago with Medtronic, right? And so we were doing work on implantable devices. So it was a defibrillator and pacemaker in one. And in the European market, we were looking at what is this experience for customers. And basically, the customer that has an implantable device, they're supposed to get a reading every day and send it to their clinic. And the idea is that there is a device that would sit bedside through telemetry, would read what's going on. But this was pre kind of Wi-Fi as we know it today, right? It had to be, the data was connected to a phone line. And many of our visits to European customers, we'd ask to see this equipment, and rationally we would say, your heart and life depends on this. I'm sure you do this every day. And almost every one of us showed us basically a Tupperware bin where this equipment sat in their front closet. And that was a head scratcher for us. They would take it out and do it periodically. Well, that was a lot of old design in European buildings, right? Phones came later. So there was one phone line and it was just to the very front of the house, right? And so like, you're just looking at these challenges where internally you might just say, well, this is important. And one of the things I also try to say, avoid self-referential design, because you're not your customer.
You're not your customer.
Right. And so that was something that we were able to bring back to the design team. Like, here's a big challenge. If you want to succeed in the Western European market, you're going to have to overcome this infrastructure. Now, mobile completely transformed that, right? Sure. So there are new opportunities, but those were ways that we were able to show it wasn't a one-off story. We showed multiple apartments and multiple bins of basically like Rubbermaid Tupperware containers holding this very valuable reading equipment that somebody's life depended on, but they didn't do it every night as designed.
As designed, yeah. Well, I'm thinking back to that statement that you made, that a new idea is the death of an old idea, right? Or however you word it.
Yep.
Just thinking about that from a change management standpoint, I do a lot of change coaching and a lot of change management support in organizations. And the biggest piece that I find myself coaching on so often is that empathy that is required as you're moving people through that someone, whether we're changing a process or whether we're changing from system A to system B, or we're redesigning something entirely, someone was there when that thing was built or designed or created. And it is highly, highly possible that the person who created it or built it or designed it or bought it or won our organization over to implementing it is sitting in the room with us right here, right now.
Right.
And they're very, very attached to it. And as we move, that grief, that letting go of that thing that they brought in, that was their idea, that was they championed it for a really long time. And now we're moving on to something new. And we have to allow the space for them to acknowledge that this new thing doesn't mean that we didn't have 20 years of success.
Right.
And I like the empathy that requires at some time that was the right choice for us. Now it is not the right choice for us. Both have to be able to exist, and we have to be able to put the human of then in the center of then, and the human of now in the center of now, and the human who's feeling that in the center of the change management initiatives.
Right. I know. And I love how you've positioned that too, because I'm also a big fan and believer in an improv style. So a kind of a yes, and, a declaration, and then yes, and like, it's true. And we have to continue to change. We have to continue to leverage the work that was done or the intent. And one of the things I'll share too, from a design perspective, is a kind of a human-centered design principle is fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Because when we understand the problem, it's like, how can we chip away at this? How can we continue to get better at whatever that problem or struggle the customer's having? But if we fall in love with the solution, especially early in a process, what we tend to see are more egos trying to say, I was right. See, that was my solution. And that becomes kind of counterproductive in organization. So one of the framing mechanisms too, just to remind teams, is like really understand that problem, and some love might be strong. So have a healthy relationship with the problem.
We've got a lot of engineers fall in love with that's some strong language for
right.
All right, so we'll keep going here. We are talking about how to use human-centered design to capture value. And we're on to the next topic here. If you're just picking up this podcast and you're just jumping in, I'm going to need you to stop, hit rewind, go back to the beginning. This has just been really enlightening. We're here with Matt Arnold. He serves as principal for services and strategies and solutions at Brightidea, and really is sharing with us some of the just great things that transform the way the world innovates. And he's talking about human-centered design. Specifically, we're talking about how to use human-centered design to capture value. So we've had this insight into what really is human-centered design, really what is the value that human-centered design can bring by focusing on customers' needs and how that provides clarity. Talked a little bit about the challenges around the human-centered design and why it's so tough and what the rub is. And now we're moving on to kind of a fourth topic here, which is really helping us reduce some cognitive biases. So there's something here about human-centered design that can help us reduce some cognitive biases that harm our ability to capture value. Talk us through that one, Matt.
Yeah, there's been a lot of great work that's been developing over the years, but we've made really big strides in behavioral science and kind of cognitive science. And with that, we also are starting to realize, cognitive biases that get in the way, that prevent us from seeing what we might need. And part of that is going back to one of the general mindsets of human-centered design is radical collaboration. Customers don't buy org charts, they buy value. So the way that we need to collaborate and get different perspectives. And so some of those are as simple as having more diverse teams to have more diverse perspectives. If we don't have diversity in the team that's developing something, we're not going to see and understand or have empathy for the customers easily. And we also kind of fear the negative outweighs the good. There's a cognitive bias there that maybe we shouldn't change, right? That feels too risky. And so ways that we can use design to overcome that is through human-centered design. We're showing, not telling. We're prototyping a lot through the process. We're actually, a lot of ways, we're doing co-creation with customers, where we're working with them. If they were to design their ideal solution, what would that be and why? And I know some business people are probably bristling right now. We're not turning design over to the customer. And no, absolutely not, right? That it's because sometimes customers even have a hard time saying what exactly they want, but you can use that as opportunities to then better understand their goals and what they would achieve. And if they achieve their goal, what would that enable for them? So we can start to think ahead of that on how we might make life easier. But if folks are interested in a great resource, there is a friend of mine, Adam Hansen, was the co-author of a book called Outsmart Your Instincts. Ooh. And it is really a behavioral approach to innovation. And he focuses on the front end of innovation, on new ideas, and he outlines a handful of cognitive biases that prevent us from being more innovative, from exploring new ideas. And I've just thought that, kind of related to change, that those are some of the things that we struggle with. And maybe another tool or tip that I picked up along the years was an acronym called NAHITO, which is nothing interesting happens in the office. It's a reminder to get out away from your desk and go talk to customers, go observe customers using your product or service, but really understanding what is it like in the life of the customer and where do you fit in? I mean, we like to think that we're the most important thing to our customers, but usually we're just a sliver of their life. But how can we overlap? What are their goals? What are our goals? And then maximize our design to meet that.
Absolutely. For years, the technique that I've taught there is go see, right? Go see. And I don't know how to say that without taking 2 steps forward, right? Go see, like you can't even talk about it while staying at your desk. Go see.
One
Oh,
of my design teams, our symbol was a running shoe. It was a reminder to like get out of the office, go and go see, right?
go see what they're doing. So a lot of folks talk about empathy in this space, and I've heard you share that empathy is important, and there's something else there too. What else is important besides empathy?
Well, I think curiosity is incredibly important, and being able to understand why something is happening. Why is a customer doing this? Why might they want that? But getting into the why rather than just how they might be doing something today, because I think then sometimes we hard code on trying to maximize for what somebody was doing in the past, rather than do we understand why and what that might open. One of the things too that is from colleagues of mine in the innovation space at Maddox Douglas, but we talked about insight statements and work that we were doing there. And the insight statement is the short formula for the insight is it's a customer goal. What are they trying to accomplish?
Okay.
The reason they believe that, why do they want to do that? And then there's a friction point, usually a but statement. We call it the sexy but, right? And because that's where the magic in the design opportunity is. And the one story as we were working with Crest and the whitening strips for years, we were focused on the ergonomics of the toothbrush. We were like, is the right mix of toothpaste flavor? But the more you did work with customers, you talk to them and they're basically then their insight statement, right? Their goal was to have a cleaner, brighter smile. The reason, because it makes me feel healthier and younger. But brushing and flossing alone don't do the trick. So then the insight was, okay, it's not the brushing and floss. They need something else. And then a new product category emerges. And so if we continue to focus on, we just make toothbrushes or we just make toothpaste, rather than we help our customers with brighter smiles, we help them feel healthier. And you can see that with a lot of tools over time, right? Where what is the customer trying to achieve? Like Blockbuster was popular for a long time because they had a great selection of movies. People wanted to be entertained. They wanted good movies but then what Netflix figured out is people aren't that interested in going to a video store to do this, right? But they still wanted entertainment. And so that moved from sending DVDs to ultimately to streaming to then creating their own content, similar to, Apple and Amazon. I don't think 20 years ago, any television exec at a broadcast network would have thought that they wouldn't be on an Emmy stage. And yet here you have Ted Lasso produced by Apple, right? You have all these Amazon Prime series, you have these Netflix series that are dominating the Emmys. And at the end of the day, customers want value, they want entertainment. They don't necessarily need it from ABC or they don't need it from Blockbuster. And so trying to understand and continue to get to that value can be helpful.
Absolutely. And that's how you continue to innovate, and that's how you stay ahead and you stay ahead of that curve. And that absolutely is what we're getting back to, which is delivering value, right? And we as organizations, we've got to produce value or we're going to stagnate and we're not going to continue to move forward in the market.
Yep.
Oh, wonderfully insightful. Matt, thank you so much for your time and your insights. This has just been a really, I keep using the word insightful, but I've learned so much, and I have no doubt that our listeners have as well. This would not be the Even Better podcast if I did not ask you my sort of trademark question. How about you? What's making you even better these days?
Well, it's an ongoing project, right? Me as an ongoing project, right? Just with our lives, like work in progress. But I think for me, and just related to customer insights and value, is feedback, being open to feedback, right? And it's like we said, it can be challenging on the organizational side if we put things out there and we see a customer doesn't want it or they don't think it's interesting or valuable, right? That can hurt. But early in my career, I had a good mentor that said superstars thrive on feedback. And so I'm not saying that I'm a superstar, but being open to feedback, and I think feedback from customers, but also from colleagues, right? And being in a trusting environment. So at Brightidea, one of the things I love is my colleagues there, super smart people, but great people too, not just smart, right? Great people. And able to really check with folks like, hey, could you take a look at this? Could you critique this? Because I want to make sure that this is better, working with customers and getting their feedback. So just the concept or idea, feedback is a gift, I think, is one of the things that I try to use to get better. sometimes it can hurt, right? But if we do remember, the intent is so that we're all better together, feedback can be a gift.
Absolutely. I have, regardless of how it was delivered, I have chosen to receive feedback as a gift. And I've always imagined that what the other person is saying is, Sinikka, I think you're awesome, and you could be even more awesome.
Right. If somebody didn't care, they probably wouldn't say anything. Now, there are ways that we can deliver it better than others. Sometimes it could sound kind of jerky, but to your point, it's if somebody's taking the time, right? And if you are able to have that positive frame, I love your frame because it's this person wants me to be better, wants to help me be better, right?
Right. I remember as an organization, when we started publishing our blogs on a regular basis and our posts and our newsletters and stuff, an employee in the organization was really frustrated when we got feedback from a dear reader, a beloved reader who was sharing punctuation correction. And this employee was like, oh, why is she doing this? And because she loves us.
Yeah. Yep.
She is giving us feedback because she does not want us to be embarrassed by having it wrong. She wants us to be right.
Absolutely. And I could always do better myself, but yeah, maintaining that kind of a sense of grace and gratitude for it, rather than bristling up. So yeah, maintaining that positive attitude about the feedback could be a challenge, but
it is in fairness, it's easier some days than others for sure. Well, Matt, this has been an absolute joy. Thank you so much. If some of our listeners want to reach out to you or learn more about your organization and what you do, what is the best way for them to find you or to find Brightidea?
Brightidea can be found online, brightidea.com. Find me on LinkedIn. There's a lot of Matt Arnolds in the world, but I'm the one that works at Brightidea and is based in Iowa City, Iowa. So those are ways that they could reach out and either connect with Brightidea or connect with me directly.
Fantastic. Thank you. And of course, if we get to them, we'll pass it along. But thank you so much for taking the time. It has been an absolute joy, Matt.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today.
You bet. And for all of you listening in, thank you so much. And on behalf of all of us here at Your Clear Next Step, we hope the rest of your day is even better.
Thank you for tuning in today. The Even Better podcast will be back with more content soon. But in the meantime, subscribe to our podcast or check out our website at yourclearnextstep.com for more information. See you next episode.